Well, hey, Dave here with Carden Custom Framing with another unboxing, this time with our Plein Air box, something that Alicia and I put together in conjunction with the Prairie Plein Air Artist Group here in Bismarck, Mandan. And right now we're going to go through a few of the things that are in the box itself. And we'll go through a little example of how everything works together and maybe how I put something together in the end there too. But again, Carden Custom Framing put this all together. Thanks to Alicia for kind of curating all the quality art supplies. And on deck here we've got the Winsor Newton Promarker Watercolour marker. It's got two tips. It's got a more finer brush tip and a thicker brush tip. One thing I found out about this is that the pigments were definitely a lot more rich on paper than they were kind of just on the appearance of the packaging or tubing of the marker itself. Next, we've got the Lyra kneadable eraser. Now, the case that comes in is really what is the highlight for that product, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Here is a Zen All Media short handle Filbert number 6 brush. I've never had one of these before. I like that rounded edge there. We're going to see how the lines kind of work and kind of variations we can come up with. Golden Open Acrylic. We've got some yellow ochre here that we're going to be playing with as well. The Golden Opens have a slower dry time, so kind of comes in clutch with those Plein Air projects. General's Chalk Pastel Pencil. Looks like rose was the color we have in this box. And then a viewfinder cut by Carden Custom Framing. It's an 8-ply mat that we've shaped into the viewfinder space to help you kind of create your composition. A travel brush washer. This is an expandable piece of plastic that you can pour your water in so that you can carry it everywhere and keep your brushes nice and clean while you're doing your work. And then a Strathmore toned blue mixed media pad. Now I thought the paper was going to be a lot thinner, and it was actually really stocky, which I thought is going to be really nice when it comes to working with any watercolors, which a lot of the items in this box here are water soluble. So the watercolor projects, but even the acrylics and the oils, maybe the gouaches, less buckling on that paper. Now, as we mentioned, the Prairie Plein Air Artist Group is who we kind of worked with on this one, on getting some basic supplies put together to get you started. And then we have a list of items that you shouldn't forget, anything from sunscreen to water, all the things you need to stay safe, and then some items on the bottom of that list that you can find in the store if you want to expand your Plein Air kit. Now remember, when we're outside doing art, adventure arting, if you will, we're going to come across friends like this little guy in the corner here, and we're going to have to just kind of respect each other's space as we go along. Definitely don't encourage anyone to aggravate any of the native species by swatting at them or spraying them. A lot of the times, if you just leave them be, they'll leave you be as well. So just before I close up this box, I'm just kind of navigating my new friend here out of the way, and so I don't shut him in forever. And yeah, let's see what all these tools can do. So for this adventure, I found myself out in the backyard to do some in plein air. In plein air is a French phrase meaning in the open air. It's the art that refers to the practice of painting outdoors directly from a subject matter, capturing the light, atmosphere, and colors of a scene as they are experienced in the moment. And that is what me and my little girls are doing outside on this particular day. At Dylan and Josie, both outside getting creative as they are kind of frequently doing here, but here I am unboxing everything, getting everything ready and staged for a little test sheet that we're going to do to kind of see how each of these items lays down. Again, a satisfying thing with this travel brush cleaner was just unfolding it, expanding it. The sponge at the bottom, I wasn't sure if that was meant to just kind of help soak up extra water off the brushes, or if it was needed to be on the bottom of the container itself. If anyone knows, feel free to let me know. But here we are pouring some water. If you're out and about and you're near a creek, do as my friend Katrina Case says and get some creek water for your adventure painting. And let's get started and see how this stuff goes. So we started off with the General's Rose Chalk Pastel Pencil. I'm not familiar with any chalk pastels myself, so this was a new medium to kind of play around with. It's not water soluble. It's spreads very nicely with the fingers. It's nice for gradients. And so I will play with that a little bit later on layering. But then I went to again, how I mentioned earlier, the rich tones of the watercolor, Winsor Newton watercolor marker, I noticed that right away the fatter side brush was a little bit less pigmented than the other one. I don't know if it's just the pigment needed to run from one end of the marker to the other, but that's kind of how that looked. And then I went to the water-soluble graphite pencil. This was fun. This is just a big fat pencil in my hands, and what you can do with it, with the variations of using either side, letting it be erasable, using the kneadable eraser here to lighten things up and get that graphite back off the picture to see how well both the eraser worked and how easy the graphite was to pick up. But both very quality items there working together, and using the water to activate that graphite was really fun. As you'll see here, I'm working on the blue of the watercolor marker here. After it's sat on the paper and has dried, it's still easy to reactivate and move around like a watercolor pigment. So that was fun to do, picking up the pigment on the brush and using it in other spots, and then going over to the water-soluble graphite. It just became like butter. It's like graphite butter when you add that water to it. So it was really fun to pick up that pigment in the brush, use it elsewhere, move it around. As you can see there, the number 6 Filbert brush was really fun to kind of change angles, get these fine lines, and then turn it back on its end and make it really fat so I can do these gradients with this as well. Golden Opens, again, a longer slow time, so something that is nice when you're out in plein air. Doing in open air art is having something that has a little bit slower dry time, so you're not struggling against that to get the composition that you're looking to accomplish. And with this, even with it being a Golden Open, it's still laid down and dried relatively quick. So I decided to play around with some layering it on top of the watercolor marker there to see if it would activate that, kind of create a green hue, which it kind of did. But the Golden Open is not the same water solubility as the other two items. I quickly grabbed that General's Chalk Pastel Pencil and started layering with that too. And now again, I know it's not water soluble, but I had to see if using that in conjunction with the blue watercolor marker would create any sort of deeper hues, and it sure looked like it kind of created a violet or purple hue. But again, that pastel pencil is not meant to be used with water. It's just fun to play around with the layering here. Layering, as I'm saying, and then using that watercolor marker itself on top of the acrylic. As you can see there, the acrylic wasn't completely dry, so I was getting a little bit on the nib there. But still, it laid over the top. And then putting it on top of the water-soluble graphite was really fun because it ended up creating sort of a Payne's gray look. The pigments blended together very nicely, which I didn't think would happen between the ink and the graphite itself, but as you can see right there, it kind of blends rather nicely, and was kind of an effect that I enjoyed playing around with. Trying to reactivate some of that golden acrylic, that yellow ochre with that blue watercolor marker, getting some green pigments. Trying to stage out what I was going to do as my final picture here. And here's an example of the viewfinder, using it to kind of focus in on what your view is and what you're going to be painting or creating, instead of using all the distractions around you to kind of mess up your composition. Use that viewfinder, hold it up, create the landscape that you want to kind of portray, and then go from there. So I chose the shed in my backyard with a little bit of a lilac bush that was starting to bloom a while back, and kind of just had at it with each individual piece in the box. I didn't use any art supplies that weren't in the box, just whatever the box had, just to see how versatile it was, what kind of shortcomings it might have, and kind of how I could stretch each one to create something of a picture itself. Now again, having that case for that kneadable eraser is nice. I've had kneadable erasers over the years that have dried out, and having this case here for a while now has shown that it's not allowing the eraser to dry out as quickly. And it was a nice fun touch to have with the water-soluble graphite pencil. It does help it does erase the graphite itself, but even after it's water activated, I found that it did lighten it up a little bit. Not too much. Once that water activates the graphite, it's in the grains of the paper pretty good, so it's not so easily erased with the kneadable eraser. But if you used a plastic eraser, maybe that would be more beneficial or useful. So just a little bit of water, just adding to that graphite, just makes those lines bold, picks up that pigment into that Filbert number 6 brush, and you can carry that and create shadows in a different way that I wasn't really expecting. I'd never worked with any of these art supplies personally, so it was really fun to kind of navigate my way through the box, layering things and seeing how they each worked together, as you can see here, or individually, kind of create some sort of picture that I had going on. Again, that adding of the graphite to the blue watercolor marker, I loved the Payne's gray look that it came up with. Made me curious on other watercolor markers what the colors could kind of come up with, what kind of darker shades with that graphite pencil, and kind of just watercolors in general, how it might be able to influence any sort of composition or picture that someone's coming up with. Now, just adding little dots of that blue just created such a loaded pigment on the brush that you can see I was able to use that blue and take it everywhere around the shed there. Now for the majority of the lilac tree here, I used the sharper, pointier end of the graphite pencil, but finding out that the other end, it's a hexagonal shaped pencil, so it's got a nice grip to it. It's nice and thick in the hands, but it's nice to turn that around and use the finer edges of the back end to kind of get some more finer lines, which I do later on here in the picture. I'm just grabbing some darker tones underneath, knowing that I'm going to go back over with the watercolor, or excuse me, with the water on the brush, and making this more of like a smooth, richer branch line here that we got going on. Adding that blue, because I love that kind of Payne's gray look that it comes up with. Now the Filbert, again, having that rounded, flat, like kind of broad edge is nice to kind of get what I was looking to accomplish with the branches. But then being able to turn it on its side and get these sharp, fine lines was really fun too. So the versatility of just this one brush, I would say, is a nice one to have if you don't have a lot of room to go out and paint in plein air or go adventure painting and you need just one brush. This is one that I would definitely recommend, that Zen All Media short handle Filbert number 6 brush. So there's the sharp lines coming off the back end of that water soluble graphite using the more blunt side. I went over with the Chalk Pastel Pencil, the rosé, just to create some highlights and kind of see how it layered on top of both the blue watercolor and the graphite, water soluble graphite. Again, it's not water soluble, so it doesn't move with the water, but it was kind of a fun addition to the piece, knowing that I was going to add water later and it wasn't going to bleed in more. It's kind of a fixed medium that you're adding to an unstable one. A little bit of order in the chaos, if you will. Fun little trick I discovered there was just, if I want to get the sharp lines with the Filbert brush, and I wasn't getting them necessarily with the back of the graphite pencil, just getting some water on that brush and then picking the pigment off directly off of the graphite was another fun thing to learn about the art supply itself. Now I know nearing to the end here, I neglected to get the shot of the Golden Opens, but here is the final product that I came up with. Using the Golden Opens to kind of replicate the budding of the lilac bush itself, I went over with the blue watercolor marker to kind of activate a little bit of a green hue you'll see in a little bit as you get closer. But altogether, a fun little experiment. Not my favorite picture, but when you're working with limited supplies and seeing how they all come together for the first time, not a bad result. So head to Carden Custom Framing, pick yours up today, or go to cardencustomframing.com and head to the shop and pick yours up there. Thanks so much.